Now, the way I describe this, it sounds kind of negative. All these industries are going to be destroyed. But we have to remember, this is great news because our lives are going to be so much better. Hello, let's talk about how Elon Musk's companies are going to revolutionize the world, destroy certain industries, and make the world a much better place. We're going to talk about Tesla, the Boring Company, and SpaceX, mostly Tesla. The first and most obvious industry that Tesla is going to destroy is the internal combustion engine auto industry. Basically, most of what we know as the auto industry today is going to be destroyed. It's partly the electric vehicle thing, but this is really more about the Robotaxi network. What a lot of people aren't talking about with the Robotaxi network is how one Robotaxi replaces more than one car.
So we see potential for smoothing out the demand distribution curve and having the car operate at a much higher utility than a normal car would operate. So typically the use of a car is about 10 to 12 hours a week. So most people will drive 1.5 to 2 hours a day, typically 10 to 12 hours a week of total driving. But if you have a car that can operate autonomously, then most likely you'd have that car operate for a third of the week or longer. So there are 168 hours in a week, so probably you've got something on the order of 55 to 60 hours a week of operation, maybe a bit longer. So the fundamental utility of a vehicle increases by a factor of 5.
Elon Musk talked in one of his presentations about how a Robotaxi will be on the road for about 60% of the time. A typical vehicle today is on the road about 5% of the time. If that's accurate, that means the Robotaxi is on the road taking the place of 12 cars. Now, it's a little more complicated than that. The typical EV, the expectation for a Tesla is 1 million miles. The typical car lasts for maybe 150,000 miles. The typical car drives for maybe 10 to 20,000 miles a year. The expectation is that a Robotaxi will do 100,000 miles or more a year. So to be conservative, let's say that one Robotaxi takes 5 cars off the road. Okay, so you have one new Robotaxi produced. That means 5 fewer other cars need to be produced. It's a little more complicated than that in another way. And Elon mentioned this, I forget where, but at one point Elon mentioned this. Because the use of EVs and Robotaxis are going to lower the cost per mile of transportation, it seems likely that people will use them more. That there's this notion that this is actually going to reduce traffic problems. It may actually increase traffic problems because people will take trips they might not have taken. People will take trips they might not have taken otherwise because the cost of the trip is less on a per mile basis. That as a rough guess, it seems reasonable with the idea that Robotaxis will be on the road 12 times as much as regular cars, with the idea that Robotaxis, EV Robotaxis, will last 1 million miles or more. It seems reasonable to, as a conservative estimate, say that one Robotaxi will replace 5 cars. So what we have today in the world is a certain number of companies producing a certain number of cars. And what we're going to see is as Tesla scales up, when Tesla makes 1 million cars in a year, that's 5 million cars fewer that the ICE auto industry will be able to sell. So what that does is you have these companies, you have like Volkswagen and you have Toyota. These companies are built on expecting to sell a certain number of cars. They have loans, they've borrowed money, and they have to pay interest and principal back on these loans. That requires them to sell a certain number of cars. And as Tesla produces 1 million cars a year and takes 5 million car sales out of what those companies are selling, when it gets to 2 million cars a year and it removes 10 million cars that those companies would sell, some of the companies are going to start to fail. They're going to fail. They're going to go under. There's governments. It may be that some governments will try to prop them up, but unless they can come up with competitive Robotaxis using electric vehicle technology, they're simply going to fall behind. They're going to be gone. It may be that a company like Rivian will be able to keep up and they'll be able to make something that people will want. It may be that comma.ai will develop a sufficient self-driving technology that other car companies can adopt. But regardless, if everybody goes to robotaxis, which is where it's going, if everyone goes to robotaxis, then and it doesn't have to, I shouldn't say everyone. If 20% of the US population or the world population starts using robotaxis instead of regular cars, if 50% of the people who are currently driving their own cars decide, you know what, I don't need to own my own car anymore. I can rely on a robotaxi and I don't need to bother with having a garage, worrying where I'm going to park it, take care of oil changes, all the advantages that you get with an EV robotaxi by just saying, you know what, I'm just going to ride this thing. It's going to cost me less than owning my own car. And that's where we're heading. Then we're going to see a massive disruption in the car industry. And probably most of the car companies that you know will not survive. The internal combustion engine itself is going to fade into oblivion. And most of these companies are dependent on the internal combustion engine to make everything work for it. So, the first thing we're going to see is the ICE auto industry, the auto industry that we know, GM, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, Volkswagen, Toyota. They're all probably, some of those companies, most of those companies are going to be gone unless something changes in how this is done. Those companies are just going to be radically altered. And along with it, you have advanced manufacturing techniques that Tesla is developing where even more robotics are used. The cars are designed so that robots can build them. So there's fewer jobs in producing cars. There's more jobs for Tesla in producing robotaxis and producing EV robotaxis. But overall, there's going to be less need for these jobs. So a lot of those jobs, now a lot of the people who are currently working in the auto industry may be able to move into jobs with Tesla. But it's a radical revision in the way things are going to work. So you're going to see the ICE auto industry gone. That's number one. That's the first industry that's gone. The other obvious industry that's going to be wiped out by Tesla is the petroleum industry. Internal combustion engines are powered by petroleum. And oil or gasoline used for cars, gasoline, diesel, etc., that's used for cars and trucks in America, in the world, are a huge portion of the demand for oil. You're going to see a massive reduction in the demand for oil. We're already starting to see it. The price of gas is already starting to drop, but it's going to be much bigger than this. And it will make, for a brief moment, gas cars a little bit more competitive simply because the cost of fuel will be less, but it will not be enough to save them from EVs. And you're going to see the petroleum industry wiped out. There will still be petroleum produced. There are still plenty of uses for petroleum, but the price for petroleum is going to drop. The fracking industry that produces any segment of the petroleum industry that has a high cost of production is going to be wiped out. They're simply not going to be able to produce at a competitive price below what they're able to sell the oil for. This is also going to affect natural gas as we see solar. It's going to affect coal. The megapack, as we see megapack and power packs in homes, as we see that displace the need for peaker plants and other fossil fuel power plants, we're going to see massive reductions both in the petroleum industry, natural gas, coal. They're going to take big hits, which is good for the world as a whole because they pollute. It's also good because to the extent that those resources are still in the ground, if someday we find a use for them or we find a way to use them in a cleaner manner, then they will still be there. I don't think that's really a huge concern. I think there's huge reserves down there anyway, but we're going to see that that's going to die off. The petroleum industry is done. And it's one of the big sources behind all the negative criticism that we see of Tesla in the media is the oil industry and the ICE auto industry funding articles critical of Tesla, trying to stop the inevitable destruction that they see coming. Okay, so those were the two obvious ones. Let's talk about something that people haven't talked about yet. How about the car insurance industry? What we have now is I own my own car and I pay a car insurance company to cover me in case I cause an accident or my car is stolen or somebody breaks into my car or I get hit by someone else. and I need medical care, and I need my car repaired, and I need to pay whatever damages I caused to the other person, or I need whatever was stolen replaced, all of that is going to be gone in a world of robotaxis, because I'm not going to own my own car anymore. And even if I own my own self-driving car, while the car is being driven by the software, by the car itself, while I'm not actually driving it, the company that designed the software, the company that is actually operating the car, is going to be responsible for any damage that's caused by the car. So you're going to see any robotaxi is going to be effectively insured by Tesla itself. If it's a Tesla, if it's on the Tesla Robotaxi network, just like Uber's cars are covered by Uber's insurance, Lyft's cars are covered by Lyft's insurance while they're operating in their network. Any robotaxi is going to be covered by Tesla. There's no need for you to have Progressive covering your car if your car is only operating in self-driving mode. And if you're only using it in self-driving, and if you're only driving it yourself out of self-driving mode for a small percentage of the time, then you don't really need a lot of insurance. And Tesla will probably provide a much more competitive insurance product. They're already offering insurance. And you're going to see Progressive and Geico and State Farm and Allstate and Travelers and Hartford. Many of these companies, a huge chunk of their business is dependent on car insurance. And you're going to see them either wiped out completely or massively reduced. It's going to be a huge change in the insurance industry because so much of the insurance industry relates to cars. There's still a lot left. There's still homeowners insurance, there's still commercial insurance, but even commercial vehicle insurance, so that's gone too. So, and life insurance, of course, will still be the same, but I'm talking in particular about the property casualty insurance industry, which is Allstate, State Farm, Geico, Progressive, the Hartford, Travelers. A lot of these companies are heavily dependent on those areas, and they're going to be wiped out. Now, going along with the insurance industry, and this is one I haven't seen anyone talking about either, is the legal industry. Because on the one side of the car accident, personal injury industry, you have the insurance companies representing people who were injured in accidents. On the other side, you have the plaintiff's lawyers. And by the way, I am a plaintiff's lawyer. I've been an insurance defense lawyer, and I am a plaintiff's lawyer now. And what's going to happen, first of all, is robotaxis, self-driving cars in general, are going to have much fewer accidents. They're just going to have fewer accidents. Number two, they have a lot of cameras. So the fake accidents that happen, there are parts of the country. Now, I've worked in two different areas. In upstate New York, where I'm from, there's not a lot of fraud. So not as big of a problem. And really, it's not the big lottery system that we have here in Florida, where I am now. There have definitely been situations where rings of criminals set up fake accidents in order to generate money. And then they have this whole process where they generate money for themselves and give a little bit of money to the quote victims. And that's pretty much all gone because you can't have a fake accident when the self-driving robotaxi has 8 cameras running. And how the accident actually happened is recorded and saved and stored and can be used. So if somebody fakes an accident, you're going to be able to tell. So that's a big chunk of it. Another big chunk of it is simply there's going to be fewer accidents. Self-driving cars are already safer than human drivers. Not too far from now, they're going to be 10 times as safe as human drivers, and then they're going to be 100 times as safe as human drivers. And we're going to a world where we have essentially no accidents. In a world with no accidents, there's no need for accident lawyers. And it's not just the accident lawyers. What about the drunk driving defense lawyers? Self-driving cars can't drive drunk. There's no more drunk driving cases. Drunk driving cases are a huge chunk of the volume in the criminal courts. That's prosecutors who are losing work. It's defense lawyers who are losing work. And on top of that, even a much larger chunk of our criminal cases. I also do criminal defense, so I know a lot about this, and I write articles about criminal cases in Boca Raton for West Boca News. A large chunk of the criminal cases we see start with a traffic stop, where police pull a car over for some kind of traffic violation, and they use that as a justification to search the car, etc. Well, do we still need traffic stops in a world where we have ultra-safe self-driving cars? It's going to take a little while for cities and towns and states and counties to catch up, but we really will not need traffic enforcement anymore when we get rid of human drivers and we have self-driving cars that are inherently safe. It's just not necessary anymore. And when we get rid of traffic stops, that eliminates a huge chunk of the drug cases. It eliminates a lot of other cases. Driving while with a suspended license is the #1 crime in Palm Beach County, Florida. And no one's going to be driving with a suspended license because it will be cheaper and easier to ride in the Robotaxi network than it will be to drive your own car with a suspended license and face all the risks of driving with a suspended license. No one's going to be driving without insurance. That's another big common crime. Driving without a registered vehicle. All of these very common offenses that we see in Florida and elsewhere are gone. And what that means is the criminal defense lawyers are dramatically cut back. There's still going to be murders, there's still going to be domestic violence, there's still a lot of other crimes that are still going to happen. But a lot of the crime that we see today, and this is a wonderful thing, right? We're making society a better place. The people with suspended licenses are the most dangerous drivers on the road. So we're making the roads safer. We're making our lives safer. And at the same time, we're reducing a lot of the abuses that some people complain about abuses in the criminal justice system, about police abusing blacks, abusing minorities, abusing their power. Well, we're going to be taking away that power. They're not going to need it anymore. We don't need the police to take care of these issues for us anymore because the self-driving cars themselves are making us safer on the roads. So that's a huge impact on lawyers both in the personal injury industry and in the criminal law industry. So both on the prosecution side and the criminal defense side, we're going to need a lot less lawyers. We're going to need fewer judges. We're going to need fewer police working on these things. And these are going to be difficult things for governments to handle wait, we need fewer police officers. But as voters, we're going to need to demand that. Hey, we don't need this function anymore. Stop doing this. Let's stop wasting money on that. One of my favorite lines, if you know me, is stop wasting money. Let's stop wasting money on the stuff that we don't need anymore. Governments take a long time to correct, but we need to correct that. And regardless, what are they going to stop self-driving cars for? Half the time the self-driving cars are going to be empty. They're going to stop a car. There's nothing to search. There's nobody responsible for whatever's found in the car if they can search the car. It's just a radical change. You're going to see this and it's going to blow everyone away. Another wonderful thing about self-driving cars having fewer accidents is fewer injuries. So if fewer people are injured, that's fewer trips to the emergency room. That's fewer visits to chiropractors and orthopedists and neurosurgeons and MRI machines. There's going to be much smaller, and this is a huge chunk of the demand for emergency rooms, orthopedists, neurologists. There are whole clinics in places like Florida where we have this semi-fraudulent personal injury industry. There are whole clinics that are devoted to just handling car accident cases. It's all going to be gone. It's just gone. And you're going to see a much reduced demand for medical care, which means we're going to need we're going to need more doctors for the aging population, but we're going to need fewer doctors to handle all the traumatic injuries that happen in car accidents because they're going to be built safer. Teslas are the safest cars on the road. They're going to have fewer accidents. There are going to be fewer injuries. Pedestrians won't get hit. There's all these, because the cars are better at seeing these things. The cars don't get drunk. The cars don't fall asleep at the wheel. The cars don't get mad. All of these things that we see that cause accidents. The cars have 8 cameras. We only have 2, and they're right together. They have 8 cameras spread all over the car. They have much better vision. So we're going to see a massive reduction in accidents. We're going to see a massive reduction in injuries, fewer ER visits, fewer all this demand. So there's going to be a big impact on the medical industry. And that's going to be good because we're going to get injured less. We're going to need less care. We're going to live longer. We're going to be in better health. We're not going to have crippling injuries that mean we live with pain for the rest of our lives. There's going to be less need for narcotics to treat our painful injuries. So many wonderful things about this change. We're so lucky to have this happening to us in our time. Our lives are going to be so much better in the future, but it's going to have a devastating impact on the medical industry. And it's going to mean there still will be more demand for people taking care of geriatrics, other issues, but there will be less demand for orthopedists, neurologists, chiropractors, etc. Another thing that's more obvious, and I think my friends at Now You Know talked about this, is parking lots. You go to Walmart and there's this huge parking lot. You go to a mall and there's a huge parking lot. When they're building a plaza, there's a plaza being built in West Boca Raton right now. And it's going to have, I think, 1,100 parking spaces or 1,400 parking spaces. If a large chunk of the population is riding around in self-driving cars, that are robotaxis, that are, as soon as they drop you off, they go and pick up the next person, then they're not parking. They don't need to park nearby if they are parking for you. If you have your own self-driving car and you're leaving, the car is dropping you off. But I think that a large percentage of the population is going to start riding around in robotaxis and not even bother owning their own car. Or if you do own your own car and you're going somewhere, let's say you're going to work and you're parking for work, you're not going to park for work anymore. You're going to walk in the door, you're going to get out of your car and tell the car, go make me money. And you're going to go to work and you're going to come out 7 hours later and you're going to told your car, come back and get me. There's just no need for parking lots. Parking structures, we have these parking garages. They're going to be empty. We build houses with, like my house has a 3-car garage. A lot of houses have 2-car garages or 1-car garages. A lot of people use their garages for other things. But when you're designing a home in a world where people don't own cars, there might be an incentive to say, you know what, we're not going to even call it a garage anymore. Or we'll call it a garage, but it's going to be designed for storage instead of for cars. We're going to make them in the first place for that purpose. We won't make them as big because they won't need to be that big. So you're going to see a radical change in the need in parking lots, which means we're going to have a lot more green space because we're going to turn those parking lots back into grass and trees, which is good for the environment. We'll use the parking garages that are in the middle of the cities. Now we'll be able to use that for another building. We won't need to, when we design projects in cities and places with zoning, the requirements for parking will change. You will need basically no parking or very little parking for anything you're building. And this means we're using less energy and less materials to build the things that we need to live the lives we want to live. So this is yet another good thing, but it means radical change. No one's building parking lots anymore. No one's building parking structures anymore. Massive change. And when we build malls, when we build plazas, when we build commercial buildings, we won't be building parking lots with them. I haven't heard anyone talk about this one, but it should be obvious. Traditional rental car companies, Hertz and Avis and Enterprise Rent-A-Car, they're gone. No one is going to need a rental car when you come out of the airport and you just call for a robotaxi. No one's going to bother renting cars. I mean, there's still maybe a rare case where somebody's going to want a rental car, but the vast majority of people who are in this situation are now going to say, I don't need a rental car anymore. I can just use a robotaxi. Car comes, picks you up at the airport, and just think about the convenience in life in general. You come out of the airport, instead of having to get all the way to wherever the rental car facility is, you just walk out to the curb and a robotaxi picks you up and you hop in. Same thing, going to the mall, you come out, you've got all your shopping bags, you don't have to walk through the rain to get to your robotaxi, it's waiting for you. But specifically with regard to rental car companies, it's over. They're done. Hertz, Avis, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, Budget Rent-A-Car, they're all done. Dollar, they're all done. They're all gone. In 5-10 years, no one is going to need a rental car anymore. That industry is gone. Okay, another one that should be obvious, but I haven't seen anyone talking about it, is the railroad industry. People who follow the railroad industry know that they are in intense competition with the trucking industry, that trucks have become very efficient on a per mile basis in delivering goods from the manufacturer to the warehouse, from the warehouse to the store. There are certain areas where the railroad industry is more competitive, and there's this back and forth between the railroad industry and the trucking industry. Well, self-driving semis, the Tesla semi and self-driving trucks are going to dramatically lower the cost of the trucking industry. So when the cost of trucks as a service to manufacturers, warehouses, whatever, when the and retail, Walmart uses a ton of trucks. When that cost drops by half or more, it's going to dramatically cut into the revenue for the railroad industry. Railroads in particular, I'm talking particularly right now about commercial railroads delivering products, but at the same time, I'm going to talk about this as well, it's going to cut into the commuter railroad industry. If you're riding a train, we don't really see a lot of trains anymore except in certain cities like New York and Boston. There's efforts in a lot of places to try to start rail companies, but rail companies are already uncompetitive with cars. The EVs are going to destroy that on short haul basis. If you're driving from Miami to West Palm Beach, if you're going from somewhere inside New York City, it's going to be more convenient and less expensive to ride in a robotaxi than it is to get on a train. In general, you're going to see this become amazing. And on top of that, what we're going to see is the Boring Company. This is where one of Elon Musk's other companies comes in. The Boring Company comes in and starts making transit options. They start boring tunnels all over cities and between cities. And all of a sudden it's going to become even less viable for railroads to serve the population because we have so many more options, and the railroads they're fundamentally an inconvenient option because you have to get to the railroad station. Which, if you're taking a robotaxi, I guess you can get to the railroad station pretty easily. The tunnel, the hyperloop or the loop, depending on what it's going to be, is going to be going faster than a train with fewer need for stops or no stops at all. This is going to be designed better, and you're going to eliminate the railroads, and basically nobody. And then combine that with, you start to get long haul. If we see hyperloop, if Tesla is able to develop tunnels where the vehicles are going 500, 600 miles an hour, even 300 miles an hour, you're going to see that eliminate a lot of the medium distance trips that railroads take. And at the same time, this is where another industry comes in. The airline industry is going to be affected. So right now I live in Boca Raton, Florida, and some people, when they want to go to Tampa, which is about a 4-hour drive, some people still fly. I drive. I think it's silly to fly, but some people still fly. A longer trip to, say, Tallahassee, people would like to fly. Tallahassee's a terrible airport. It's hard to get good flights, so people still drive to Tallahassee. The airline industry is terribly uncompetitive in a lot of ways. And what we're going to see is the Boring Company tunnels are going to make it easier and cheaper for you to get where you want to go on a short to medium distance, and even maybe on longer distances, especially if Hyperloop gets up to 600 miles an hour, which is competitive with airplanes. And that takes another step on the airline industry. We bring in SpaceX. If SpaceX is able to deliver point-to-point travel on long trips, New York to Sydney, Los Angeles to Tokyo, if they're able to deliver that, that is the biggest source of profits for the airlines, is the long-haul trips. So you're going to see the airline industry attacked both underground and on the road and up in space. And the airline industry is already uncompetitive and already struggles. Every airline struggles to make a profit in the first place. They're not going to survive. The railroad industry is going to be dramatically cut back or fail. The airline industry is going to fail. There's going to be very little left of all these industries. Now, the way I describe this, it sounds kind of negative. All these industries are going to be destroyed. We have to remember, this is great news because our lives are going to be so much better. We're going to be able to get where we want to go for less money. Right now, the typical American car owner spends about $10,000 a year on a car. Maybe it's $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year, something like that, depends on the car. If you're riding in a robotaxi, you're maybe spending $2,500 a year to travel the same distance. You're going to be saving a huge amount of money, and that's money that you're going to have available to spend on other things, which is going to boost other industries. It's going to be easy. Living here in South Florida, it's going to be easy to go to Disney. We already go to Disney, people in South Florida. We already take trips to Disney. People from other places take trips to Disney. That travel is going to be easier. It's going to boost that industry. Theme parks are going to grow. Malls are going to do extremely well because right now I'd rather shop on Amazon than travel to the mall. Well, if I just pop, I don't really like going to malls anyway, but for people who like going to malls, it's going to be easier to get to the mall. You don't have to worry about parking. The Robotaxi is going to drop you off at the front door, pick you up at the front door. I think you're going to see malls expand. I think you're going to see destinations expand. A lot of things that people like to do, like let's say I'd like to go to a Miami Marlins baseball game, or I'd like to go to a Miami Heat basketball game. That trip right now is a hassle, having to drive into Miami. Well, all of a sudden, if a robotaxi is making the trip for me, or if I'm able to hop into a Boring Company tunnel to get there, that's going to be fantastic. Our world is going to get smaller. We're going to be able to travel more. We're going to be able to go to more places. We're going to be able to see our friends in distant places more easily. We're going to be able to see the sights of the world. We're going to have more free money on hand because we won't be spending it on our cars. We won't be spending it on airplanes, as much on airplanes or on trains. The cost of goods delivered to our stores will be less. The cost of goods from Amazon. Our lives are going to be better in so many ways because of these technological improvements. And at first blush, you see all these jobs are going to be destroyed. All these industries are going to be destroyed. There's going to be a lot more jobs in other areas served because of all the money that's freed up and all the increased activity. When you reduce the cost of travel, you see economic activity increase. So we're going to see a huge economic boom in America and around the world, and it's going to make the world a much better place. Yes, there will be casualties along the way, but on the whole, we will all be better off. And even the people who lose jobs in those industries, there are going to be a lot more jobs created for them, and it's going to be a wonderful world. So, if you're an Elon Musk fan, appreciate what wonderful things he's doing. We haven't even talked about Mars, we haven't even talked about Neuralink, but just the EVs and the Robotaxis combined with Boring Company and SpaceX point-to-point travel, we're going to see massive changes in the world, making our world a much better place. Thank you for watching.